So now we also have new units or new loudness measures, now new loudness units. And we need a relative one that is called LU loudness units. Yeah. We need a relative one to say, for instance, your program is 3 LU louder than your program. And of course, it has to be related to a dB. So a step of 1 LU is a step of 1 dB. It's exactly the same. So if you raise the electrical level by 1 dB, the loudness is raised by 1 LU. But with LU, we indicate, okay, we are talking about loudness here. And of course, there's a kind of relationship to VU, volume unit, and now we have loudness unit, loudness units. But then, of course, we also need an absolute measure to a certain reference. And of course, in these days of digital, we have the reference 0 dBFS, so full scale. So quite logically, we call the absolute unit loudness units reference to full scale, LUFS. So that's very logical. And note that it's not dBLU or dBLUFS. It's just LU and LUFS. So my program is 3 LU too loud. Your program has a loudness level of -21 LUFS, not dBLUFS. Yeah, don't confuse that. So LUFS is basically our new unit we are talking about, and in the English language it's very nice because you can pronounce it LUFS, you know. And we have talked to a couple of people, especially, you know, for instance, to the Beatles, and they're gonna change 2 of their songs, you know, to All You Need Is Loves and She Loves You. And also Lenny Kravitz is doing that. You know, we've also spoken to Lenny Kravitz, so it's time for a LUFS revolution, another love revolution. So what do you think, Silvio? Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, that's what he likes. Anyway, a loudness level would be indicated today like that, or in the future. The loudness level with K weighting, and that's where the K belongs, you know, on the left side of the equation as a subscript, because in ITU, they still call it LKFS, which is a mixture of things, loudness, K weighting, full scale. It's something that is not, you know, scientifically correct as far as naming conventions is concerned, but for you it's important to know LKFS and LUFS, it's all the same. So you don't have to care whether it's LKFS or LUFS. In the EBU or in Europe, we tried to find a logical and scientifically correct name for the unit, loudness units reference to full scale. So that's the only difference between those. And if the ITU or the Americans won't change to LUFS, so be it, yeah. But you know now LKFS and LUFS is one and the same thing. So this would be it. LK is, for instance, -3.8 LUFS. And that's the average level of the Metallica CD, yeah? So that's the record holder, you know. -3.8 is really loud, as Thomas has demonstrated also yesterday. Nevertheless, peaks are still important. It's still important to measure the peaks. And that's where, again, 1770 comes into play. Because 1770 not only recommends the algorithm how to measure loudness, but it also recommends a new way to measure peaks. So getting rid of the QPPM and actually measuring the true peaks of a signal. And if we go back to the comparison with the iceberg, we really want to measure this very peak up here, because we need it for electrical reasons, not to distort our signal chain. So 1770 also recommends an algorithm how to measure a true peak with an oversampling true peak meter. And I think Thomas certainly has elaborated on true peak metering and this oversampling aspect yesterday in the morning. Yeah, so you know all that. So it's also a vital part of 1770, true peak metering. Yeah. So now, the EBU has built upon that 1770 algorithm. We would be fools not to take this as our basis. So that's also the fundamental basis for our work we did in addition to 1770. Yeah? So we have the tools, and our most important one is our recommendation R128. You know that by now. So let's just remain a few minutes with R128. What is it in essence? It's a very short and precise and simple document. You read it in 10 minutes basically, or 5 minutes. It's just 2 pages and that's it. So we basically define 3 audio parameters. 3, not 1, 3 audio parameters that shall characterize an audio signal with all its relevant, you know, characteristics. So we have one, which is program loudness. That's arguably the most important one. That is that one number that indicates how loud is your program on average. And with program, we mean that can be a 10-second commercial, it can be a half an hour game show, it can be a 2-hour feature film, whatever. One self-contained item is a program. And if we measure from start to stop of this program, the average integrated loudness, that's what we call program loudness. That's one number, and that's the number that is used to normalize, to balance to the next program. So that's the idea. Then we know that now the maximum true peak level, which we define. We have a new true peak, a new maximum peak level, measured with a true peak meter now. And then, and that's the third one, we have loudness range. And I have touched on it yesterday too, and you probably all know that too. Loudness range indicates the difference between the average soft and the average loud parts of a program. So with these three parameters, we now know how loud the audio signal is, we know what the true peak level is, and we know how dynamic it is. And with a QPPM, we didn't know any of those. We didn't know how loud, what the true peak level was, and how dynamic it was. We didn't know that. With these three, we now know it. So I think that's a breakthrough. We really can characterize an audio signal now. Yeah, that's one of the, I think, one of the main messages also in this work that we did in EBU. We have now three parameters that really characterize your audio signal. Then we of course also define that new reference. What is the magic number now for that loudness level? And you certainly have heard that this reference is -23 LUFS. And I could talk now about 10-15 minutes why it's 23 and not 22, 24, whatever. Just take it for granted. There was a lot of discussion going on here, and 23 was our magic number, and that worked very nicely across different platforms, genres, and Richard van Everdingen will talk about that in the distribution side, and also in his work, 23 fit very well. So there's a couple of good reasons why we chose 23. So you could argue that 23 is the new center of our audio universe, so to speak. Yeah, it's not -9 dBFS or whatever or 0. It's -23 LUFS. That's the reference for the future. In Europe, how loud are we currently in Europe? So we measured all sorts of TV and radio stations and averaged all their average levels. So the average level in Europe is around -20 LUFS. Yeah? So we're not too far away from -23, but one consequence is already that we're gonna be softer in the future. Yeah? Those that are higher than 23 will be softer. There are of course also other ones who are lower than -23. A couple of radio stations out there. Yeah? They will be higher then in the future. But most or many broadcasters will be softer a little bit. But not too much, not too much. 3 dB, 3 LU, I think is quite tolerable on the edge. But that's also one of the reasons why we didn't go further down than 23, because if you would have to change, perceptually, I have to change maybe 6 dB down. That's a tough thing for an audio engineer. Although there are many strategies how you can do that, with just adjusting your monitor gain accordingly. Yeah? But 23, I think, is also a good number in that respect. Anyway, Europe is around that level. It will be 3 dB lower in Europe in the future. That's how it is. People will have to adjust on their remote control once, and that's it. Yeah. In addition to defining this one number, we also have something called a gating function. Yeah? So a gating method. What is that? Bob talked about the gate, and he showed measurements with gate and without the gate, and we have a kind of idea of that, but I want to illustrate that also with a animation a little bit. With the gate in place for the integrated measurement, we measure something called the foreground loudness. So the loudness of foreground signals like dialogue, prominent music, prominent sound effects, and ignore the low-level background sounds. And why is that important? You will see it in a second. Let's consider an audio signal that looks like that. That could be a talk show, whatever, with reasonably low dynamic range or loudness range. People are talking, but there's not too much going on dynamic-wise. And if we measure the average loudness of such a program, it would be that, kind of the middle line where there's half of it above and half of it below, plus or minus, plus or minus. In that case, it would be already minus 23, so that's already a loudness normalized talk show. And then we have another program that would look like that. That could be an action film, that could be a game of golf, where it's very quiet at times and suddenly there's a big applause or whatever. Or here's a gunshot or stuff like that. So a much more dynamic program. So if we measure the average loudness of this program, we get something like that. So the low parts bring it down, the high parts bring it up. So on average, we have this kind of average loudness level. So now we perform the loudness normalization. So we have to bring up this program to the same average loudness as the talk show. But now we have a problem, because we have a perceived difference in loudness, because we take these foreground sounds, the loud parts, as our reference to judge loudness. So these ones here. So we have a perceived loudness difference. So if we measure it just as it is, dynamic material appears to be too loud after normalization. And actually it was Alessandro here, from Fox, that pointed us to this fact with one of the movies you've probably seen, No Country for Old Men, which is highly dynamic, and ended up being way too loud after loudness normalization, because all those low-level sounds bring the average level down, and if you then loudness normalize it to the other things, the foreground sounds are just way too loud. So the solution would be, let's go back to the beginning, if we found a way only to measure those foreground sounds, gating out in the measurement the low-level parts, then the loudness difference goes away. That's the idea of the gate, to improve the loudness matching, loudness balance of highly dynamic material. That's the idea. Yeah. And our solution for the gating was a relative threshold of 8 LU below the ungated one. So it kind of moves with the integrated measurement. And we submitted that to the ITU even. Yeah? We very fancily called it the gate, G8, the gate. Very nice. But it turned out that the ITU liked the idea, but didn't like the 8 LU gate. So there was a lot of discussion going on whether it would be too high of a gate threshold and these kind of things. So in the end, we had to abandon that nice G8 thing, and gate thing, and had to settle on a 10 LU gate below the non-gated one. And we couldn't be happier, I have to say, in the EBU. It's very similar to 8 LU, the 8 LU gate. So we are super happy with that solution. And of course, we'll change R128 and all our relevant documents to a 10 gate, minus 10 gate. That's clear. So the 10 gate is now officially already in ITU 1770. That was a big champagne party. It was not really a champagne party, but once the gate came into ITU, that was exactly what we intended, because we didn't want to have the gate as a proprietary EBU solution. Yeah? It really belongs into the international algorithm, and that's the case since middle of March. So the gate is in ITU 1770. So gate is there, it's in 1770, fine, great, wonderful. We have a second gate, yeah? That's an absolute gate of minus 70 LUFS. That's always there to get rid of, spurious noises or whatever background noise. And it's also there, very handy, to start the loudness measurement when the audio starts, and not because there is some low-level noise going on. So you can actually run your workstation or whatever, and when the audio begins, the loudness measurement starts, because before, the absolute gate really keeps everything under control. And that's also in 1770. So all this combined gating solution is a part of 1770 since a few months, since 2 months actually. That's great. So now let's listen to a couple of audio examples that have been peak normalized and loudness normalized. So that's a short sequence of 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes. And the first is normalized to minus 9 dBFS sample peak. And then we'll hear the same sequence, loudness normalized to minus 23. So first sequence, peak normalization.
tweak that a little bit.
I was wondering if it was his...
Look where he's ended up on the downslope. He's got to just flip it across there and grow some breaks.
I wondered if it was this lucky hole-in-one forearm that he was using there. It may well have been. But it's going to be a very difficult third shot. Advantage to Furyk there, trying to fight back.
Hoe lang weet je dat? Hoe ver zijn eigenlijk? Ja, maar ja, dat is belangrijk, hè. Er staat een limiet op tot wanneer je dat nog kunt wegdoen, hè.
Hoe is dat zo simpel dan?
Ja, dat is redelijk simpel. We gaan deze discussie niet opnieuw voeren, hè. Hier hebben we het toch al lang over gehad.
Ik wil dat echt niet wegdoen.
Sta ferma. Accidenti. Chaque observateur pose un regard personnel en fonction de ce qu'il est. Le fermier ne voit ici qu'un danger pour sa récolte, les deux passionnés parlent d'amour. Chacun s'installe dans sa propre vision du paradis ou de l'enfer. Si on change d'observateur, la réalité se transforme. Chacun va piller le réel en fonction de son vécu.
Ich hatte mein Zelt, als noch alle schliefen, verlassen. Nicht fern vom Lager fand ich, wonach wir suchten. Die Oase.
Heeft u daar wel eens bij stilgestaan? Nee? Wij wel. De Amersfoortse, de inkomensverzekeraar van ondernemend Nederland.
So you see, a couple of examples work seemingly okay. A couple are totally, out of control, like the last short commercial, which is highly compressed and therefore, of course, much louder. Yeah. These were, by the way, examples that we used for our gating tests. So the first parts were sometimes very dynamic documentaries or music. So if they are, have a similar loudness range and similar peak to loudness ratio, then they also work in peak normalization mode reasonably well. But others don't, like the compressed stuff. So let's listen to the same sequence now, loudness normalized to -23 with the gate. Yeah.
Tweak that a little bit.
I was wondering if it was his...
Look where he's ended up on the downslope. He's got to just flip it across there and grow some breaks.
I wondered if it was this lucky hole-in-one forearm that he was using there. It may well have been. But it's going to be a very difficult third shot. Advantage to Furyk there, trying to fight back.
Hoe lang weet je dat? Hoe ver zijn je eigenlijk? Ja, maar ja, dat is belangrijk, hè. Er staat een limiet op tot wanneer je dat nog kunt wegdoen, hè.
Hoe is dat zo simpel dan?
Ja, dat is redelijk simpel. We gaan deze discussie niet opnieuw voeren, hè. Hier hebben we het toch al lang over gehad.
Ik wil dat echt niet wegdoen.
Sta ferma. Accidenti. Chaque observateur pose un regard personnel en fonction de ce qu'il est. Le fermier ne voit ici qu'un danger pour sa récolte, les deux passionnés parlent d'amour. Chacun s'installe dans sa propre vision du paradis ou de l'enfer. Si on change d'observateur, la réalité se transforme. Chacun va piller le réel en fonction de son vécu.
Ich hatte mein Zelt, als noch alle schliefen, verlassen. Nicht fern vom Lager fand ich, wonach wir suchten, die Oase.
Heeft u daar wel eens bij stilgestaan? Nee? Wij wel. De Amersfoortse, de inkomensverzekeraar van ondernemend Nederland.
So, well, it might not be perfect, but that's not possible, as we know now. But at least it's already much better. And you also see dynamic stuff wins, highly compressed stuff loses, in a way. So the last commercial, when the loudness advantage goes away, you only recognize, you know, the overcompression and the bad quality, all the background sound that has been pumped up by the compressor, whatever. Yeah. So that's also a good thing, that, you know, overcompression gets punished with loudness normalization. So actually, advertisement companies can really think about now new ways to attract attention. They should, because the loudness advantage is going away. And we also take away the fear from the advertisement companies that they are softer in level than the competitor, because everything is loudness normalized to the very same level. So there is this eternal fear of a commercial advertisement company. My spot has to be up there because otherwise I'm lower than the Coca-Cola commercial or whatever. We're taking that fear away. And now they can think about new ways, more dynamic ways to attract attention. So that's one other very important thing, that with a technical revolution or technical recommendation, we actually inspire creativity or new ways to craft your program. So it has a direct influence on the artist side. I think that's great too. That's really cool. So we are, you know, already quite near on our balance situation, in that case yin-yang. And what do you think, Sylvia, about that? Yeah, okay, quietness is even better sometimes, but okay, yeah. You seem to be reasonably fine with that, at least.